Welcome to worship at Bart Centenary United Methodist Church in Littlestown, Pennsylvania. I'm your pastor, Tammy Blose, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. We begin today with Mary's ponderings at the foot of the cross. Standing here in view of my son, broken and humiliated at the hands of those who declare him an enemy, at the sides of criminals, my life with my son is flashing before my eyes. I am Mary, the mother of the innocent man hanging there on that cross in the middle. Jesus, my sweet, strong miracle of a son. He came into my life like a whirlwind, changing every plan I ever had, every plan that my parents had for me, and every plan my betrothed, Joseph, and I ever made. Because of him, I was visited by an angel before I was even a wife. He was conceived through a miracle, and through angels, I was given a glimpse of his great destiny, a destiny I have pondered many times. His birth was so different from what I envisioned, and yet blessed by angels. Later, when we were visited by travelers from far away, who had also brought great claims about the destiny of my sweet little boy, along with the gifts that proved invaluable to our small family. You see, we were sent to Egypt and called back to Israel by angel visitors. I remember another visit to Jerusalem when Jesus was young. His father and I were frantic when we could not find him with our traveling party on the return trip. And then we were exasperated when we finally found him and he so nonchalantly greeted us at the temple, as if we should have known where he would be and what business he would be about. I'm so proud of the man he grew to be, a man favored by other men and by God. When he left on his great journey to fulfill the destiny that he was called to before his birth, I was a mess of emotions, proud of his great faith and abilities, and scared for what this would mean for my son, the danger that he would find himself in, scared that a day like this one might come. I heard such fantastic stories of him while he was away from home. Even knowing his great destiny, I could hardly believe that they were talking about my son. I diligently prayed for him every day. I traveled to Jerusalem this year, as I do every year, to celebrate the Passover, to remember how God freed my people, to remember the covenant that he made with us. But this year I have seen things and heard things I wish could be wiped away from my memories. This year, my firstborn son was stripped naked and scourged until he could barely stand. He was beaten until he was nearly unrecognizable. As I stood there at this cross with John, and in the midst of this terrible suffering, my son calls out, not for me to comfort him, but in order that I might be comforted, that I might be cared for. I am frozen in grief as his lifeless body is removed from the stakes of torture. I can't help but ask God, how could it come to this? Why would he allow this? How will my son fulfill his destiny now? Why did God put our family through all of this if this is how it was to end? Evening, morning, evening, morning. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and she went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and he went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in. And he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over and looked into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned, and she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and she announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What makes a person a Christian? How does it start? What is the natural order of development? There was a time in the 1950s and 1960s, during the heyday of organized religion in the United States, that there was a pattern almost everyone followed, or at least it appeared that almost everyone followed it, each Sunday. It is one that we today are forever trying to recreate. First, there was Sunday school, then worship, and it was topped off with a hearty lunch. If you were new in town, you quickly found a respectable church, and sometime in the first few months you went to a new members class. There you made sure that you understood what these Methodists or these Catholics or these Presbyterians believed. At the end of class, you confessed that you believed it too. In the meantime, you intentionally or unintentionally learned how to behave. People here wear this. We don't wear that. We stand at this time. We appreciate this sort of music, conduct ourselves in this manner, and so forth. And then, finally, you joined. You became a member. And at that point, you officially belonged. Believe, behave, belong. That was the expected pattern during that period of time. It was a wonderfully effective method for accepting and integrating people into a believing community because it was reinforced by societal expectation. But that pattern that we are forever trying to get back to does not actually reflect God's pattern of developing relationship with us. God created us to be insiders. He created humans to be in intimate relationship with Him, to belong with Him and to Him. And when human action created a divide between us and God, God continually pursued ways to restore relationship with us in order to restore that sense of belonging, to bring us back in. God began by establishing His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God would be their God, and they would be God's people. And through them, one day, all people would be restored as insiders. All people would again belong to God. God tried again, reestablishing covenant with the people under Moses. Again, God would be their God, and they would be God's people. Prophet after prophet reminded the people that God loved them and that God claimed them as His own, including the prophet Jeremiah, who foretold of a new covenant that would be written on our hearts, the new covenant that Jesus ushers in. The believe, behave, and belong pattern does not reflect Jesus' approach with us either. Jesus transformed confused or questionable individuals into disciples using the same pattern God did. Belong, behave, believe. Consider Jesus' first call to His disciples. Follow me, He said. Come be part of my group. He called them by name and made it known that they were known, that they belonged. Then He taught them. As they lived side by side, He showed them by example how to behave. It is only after all of this that He asks them to believe. And He even sends them a helper, an advocate, a teacher to remind them and to help them believe. As you sit here this Easter morning, you may or you may not be sure of what you believe. You may or you may not be sure of how a Christian is supposed to behave. But everyone, from the newest visitor to the most long-time member, can be confident that in Jesus Christ, we all belong, regardless of our belief and regardless of our behavior. We belong because of the action of Jesus Christ. We belong because He willingly died to restore a path for us so that we could belong. We belong because He overcame sin and death by rising from the dead. It is His action and not our own that creates our opportunity to belong. Just look how the disciples and Mary Magdalene, Christian insiders, if ever there were any, responded to the idea of Jesus' resurrection that very first Easter. These were people who had spent years with Him. Jesus had spoken to them many times, specifically about His death and resurrection. He had made analogies to help them understand. He had looked them in the eye and warned them of what was to come. They'd even seen firsthand Jesus raise people from the dead. And yet, as the disciples ran away from the tomb, it says they didn't understand. They didn't immediately believe. Mary Magdalene, she talked directly to two angels who confirmed Jesus' resurrection. And still she wept. And still she was confused. So if you're sitting here this Easter morning and you're not exactly sure, you know how you're supposed to behave, and you're not exactly sure what you believe, Listen closely. You are in the right place. On that first Easter morning, the people who were the most in the know didn't know what was going on. They weren't even close to having it figured out. Those who should have had no doubts about their beliefs, who should have been displaying behavior that confirmed their steadfast faith, were not at all sure that this was real, and they were behaving strangely. It's not until the one she thinks is the gardener walks up to Mary and says her name that it all begins to fall into place. For Mary and for us, before we behave and before we believe, we belong. First, God says, "Know that I know who you are. I know your name." Jesus says, "Mary, it's me." Mary had history with Jesus. In both Luke and Mark's accounts, Mary Magdalene met Jesus early on in his ministry, and she was a mess. The story told in the Gospels of Luke and Mark reveals that Jesus cast 7 demons out of her. You don't forget that anytime soon. Luke tells us that Mary was one of the women who accompanied and aided Jesus in Galilee. At all 4 Gospels, she is placed at the crucifixion and burial of Jesus. And John notes that she was there with Mary, Jesus' mother, and with John. And yet, when Jesus stands before her, she doesn't recognize him right away. Jesus says, "Whom are you looking for?" It's not until he says her name, highlighting their connection, their relationship, that she recognized that it is him, the one who showed her that she belonged. Friends, here is my Easter confession. I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Even so, it is mysterious and difficult for us to fully understand. And as much as we may want to, and we will strive to, we may never behave with the perfection of Jesus Christ. But regardless of our belief or our behavior, the true insider knowledge is this: we belong. You belong. And those who lie outside of our community today, they belong to God as well. And it's our job to make sure that they know. Friend, you have a place here. You have a place with Jesus. He lived, died, and rose again to secure your place, to secure a place for the most outside of outsiders. The truth this Easter morning is that you are known and you belong. And that is a good place to start. For after the empty tomb was discovered, after Jesus was seen by many, after the reality of the resurrection sunk in, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene each spent every day of the rest of their lives praying for his cause, working to spread his message of love and hope, a message of belonging for the insiders and the outsiders. That is the message he died for. That is the message he rose for. And friends, he is risen. He is risen indeed.